Hello, everybody. I hope you've been having a good weekend so far. I thought it was about time we did a Ukraine update. So we will take a look at that. And then that'll be good, I guess. I haven't done one of these in a while because I just wanted to kind of see how the Kursk operation was going. But we'll start in a minute. Let me just share this in the Discord. And then all things will be good. Hope people have been enjoying. If you haven't been watching it, I decided to do the movie. I've been doing the movie Bob book, brick by brick, his autobiography slash let's play slash religious text about how much he loves Mario. I don't even know how you would describe it, to be honest, but I've been going through that as well. So let me just post this, and then we will talk about what's been going down in the Ukraine cinematic universe. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, and I'll just wait a minute, then we'll get started. Okay, and I'll just wait a minute, then. All right, hello everybody. So let's go through the update. We can kind of view this as an August roundup of everything that's been going on in Ukraine over the last month or so. So, here, guys, I know it looks bad, but Zelensky's got a plan. He has a plan. Zelensky has said his troops' incursion into Russia's Kursk region is part of a victory plan he will present to Joe Biden next month. It's like he's presenting his homework report to his teacher, isn't it? I kind of get a bit of that vibe off of it. It's just like, here, Mr. Biden. I did this. Can I have a gold star? Can I have attackums now? And I don't know what Biden would say in response. I don't know if Biden can really say anything. Maybe he'd call him the president of Chile or whatever. Speaking at a forum on Tuesday, Zelensky said the success of the plan would depend on President Biden and whether the U.S. would give Ukraine what is in this plan or not, and whether we will be free to use this plan or not. Kind of reminds me of that scene in in Conan where Conan's praying to Crom and he's like, and if not, the hell with you, or whatever. Oh wait, oh sorry, this is I apologize. I was the wrong thing. Zelensky. I had it up on my other browser. That would be why that was not working. It's part of a victory plan. Second. Okay. Speaking from at a forum on Tuesday, Zelensky said, okay, it may sound too ambitious for some, but it's an important plan for us, he added, saying that he would also show the plan to both U.S. presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Not RFK, though. Well, I guess RFK is technically... Oh, he's still on the ballot in some states. He could show it to RFK, too. I'm sure RFK would have some feedback. Speaking at the same forum, Ukraine's Kiev's top. That's really weirdly worded. Ukraine Kiev's I don't know. Is that grammatically correct? Uh, I don't know. Um, that is a weird way of putting it. Ukraine Kiev's top military commander, General Alexander Zelensky, says Ukraine now controls 500 square miles of empty territory and 100 settlements. Many of these settlements consist of being like 5 buildings. The figures had not been verified by the BBC. Of course not. Why would the BBC do any verification? General Sersky said Ukraine had no intention of holding on to the territory. Okay. So the rumor I've heard is that Sersky didn't know about the whole Kursk scheme until literally the day before, and he was horrified by it. And one rumor I heard said that he wanted to resign over it. And that he just thought this whole idea was retarded and he was personally against it, which is kind of what happened, I think, also with Avdiivka and Bakhmut and a couple other cases wherein Zelensky has done things that his military commanders have not wanted to do. So I've heard that. I think Sersky, though, is on the way out. He'll probably be sent off to be the next in the long stream of Ukrainian ambassadors to Britain, because this thing's been become a debacle, and Zelensky has to throw somebody under the bus, and no one likes Sersky in the army, and they'll probably all be happy to get rid of him. So it's going to be a lot easier sacking him than sacking Zelensky, because Zelensky was widely beloved. So let's see here. Zelensky also revealed that Ukraine has recently carried out the first successful test of a domestically produced ballistic missile. Is it called the V2? Is that what we've reached at this point in time? They're making like V2s. This doesn't sound very likely, but declined to share any more details of the missile. Well, how are they going to produce the missile? Like, how? Um, are they going to like license it to be produced somewhere in Europe? Because they can't produce it in Ukraine. If they produce it in Ukraine, Russia's just going to blow it up, the plant, immediately. The forum, Zelensky said Ukraine had used some newly arrived F-16 fighter jets sent by Washington. I think it's only 6 F-16s. I think it was 6. Um, okay, let's see here. I think it was something like 6 or 7. There was not very many have actually arrived there. I think it's something. Um, okay, 6. Yes, they received around 6 of them. The first F-16 crashed, quote unquote, a couple hours. It seems like a day or two into this whole thing, and the head of Ukraine's Air Force got fired almost immediately over it. So there's been some speculation. I forget her name. A member of the Ukrainian parliament said that the F-16 got shot down by a Patriot missile. Uh, yeah, so here's the thing. Um, there's the F-16 crash. Now, a member of Ukrainian parliament said that she had talked to people and that the plane didn't crash. It wasn't pilot error. It wasn't a technical problem. It was that the Ukrainians had fired at their own aircraft using a Patriot missile battery. Now, to be fair to the Ukrainians, it's not like this is like some third world thing necessarily. Like, this stuff happens a lot. Like, Russia does this, America does this, all this equipment is very complicated. A lot of it is partially automated. A lot of it has various software glitches and just think about how often your Windows computer crashes. I'm sure that stuff like that happens all the time. So this is not uncommon, especially when they're trying to use new technology. Like the Patriot systems are new technology the Ukrainians have no experience with. And the F-16s are new technology the Ukrainians have no experience with. So this seems completely likely. I mean, the Russians have shot down their own planes a couple different times. Um, what tends to lend to the idea that it was shot down as opposed to crashing is that the pilot wasn't able to bail out. Because you'd think if it bailed, if it crashed, he would have a chance to use his ejector seat or something like that. Konstantin said this happened to a Russian cargo plane when Syrian air defenses hit it instead of an Israeli jet. Yeah, this kind of thing happens all the time. So it could have crashed. The Russians could have shot it down, or it could have been destroyed by the Ukrainian Patriot missile battery. I tend to go with that one just because it's the funniest one. But yeah, so that's part of it. So that was they had 16. They had six aircraft. So that's what one. That's 18% of their Western supplied air force gone in one battle. Not even one battle, just due to, according to them, an accident. The F-16s have demonstrated high efficiency and downed 4 Russian cruise missiles it added. Ukraine said Russia launched more than 200 missiles and drones that day, targeting the energy sector. So what? It shot down 4 out of 200, I guess. Once again, the other thing that I think is important to keep in mind is I don't know how many air-to-air missiles they have, because as we've said many times, they produce approximately 500 to 600 Patriot missile interceptor missiles a year. So I don't know how many air-to-air missiles they produce a year and how many of them Ukraine actually has. So while they can probably use different missiles with the F-16s, I don't know how many of them they have. Plus, there's only 6 of them. Now, aircraft are incredibly unreliable at the best of times. It's only been very recently that a majority of aircraft have been destroyed in combat, rather than just breaking down or crashing or pilot error or something like that. They break down a lot, and those 6 probably aren't going to last very long. Also, the Ukrainians are going to have to maintain them themselves. Like, the whole thing is just so fucking stupid. Like, as I've said many times, I feel so bad for the Ukrainian armed forces. They have to deal with this nonsense. They have to deal with, they have to deal with them getting 6 of an aircraft that's completely different from anything that they've used before, whose operational language isn't in Ukrainian. To my understanding, that the pilots had to learn advanced English before they could even be trained on the F-16s, and then there's only 6 of them, and then it's so it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Once again, it's kind of like how the Leopards and Abrams and Challengers all did horrible when they deployed them. It's not the Ukrainian army's fault that they were given completely new equipment without any proper time to integrate it or train on it or have proper supply systems, and they just get thrown into battle against a professional army with it. I don't know. I know I keep saying it, but I do, even if it's pretty obvious, I tend to lean towards Russia in this conflict. I do think that the efforts of the armed forces of Ukraine are heroic. And regardless of what side of this conflict you're on, I think you have to respect them for the fact that even if they're getting pushed back, that they're at least the fact that they're even still trying at this point in time, I think, is a testament to them. Also, you have to deal with Zelensky and Biden and Blinken and all these bozos. Jungle Joseph Borrell. So, yeah, the Ukrainian pilots. So let's go back to where's the? I thought I was reading victory plan. So we got the victory plan. They got this little place of little piece of territory there, and that's going to make all the difference. So, how I would summarize the last August is we're going to watch a clip from Batman Begins that I think very well summarizes what's happened over the month of August. So hopefully this will play okay.
Yield. You haven't beaten me. You have sacrificed sure footing for a killing stroke.
So I think that's more or less what happened. Sacrificing sure footing for an attempt at a killing stroke. Okay. So before we get into this, let's talk about the Kursk cope. Because the Kursk cope is something that I have not come to a definitive conclusion on. So let's just take a step back. So as we all know, Ukraine launched an invasion of pre-2014 Russia. Pre-2014 Russia in the Kursk region. Now, they were able to kind of walk in. There wasn't much resistance. They overran a bunch of largely empty territory, captured a couple very small settlements. I think the largest one was like 700 people. And they kind of ran around the countryside, wreaking havoc a bit. But it hasn't, it's gotten kind of completely shut down at this point in time. And I don't think they've been able to move any further. And they're starting to try to dig into this little bit of territory they've succeeded in getting. And this brings us to the whole cope thing. Now, because the Russians are trying to make excuses for this, and I'm not really sure who to believe. So let's just go over the different narratives of this. The first narrative is that they took Russia completely by surprise. Russia was not expecting this to have happened. Ukraine was somehow able to get all the units in the area, achieve complete operational supplies, go across the border, and take and temporarily occupy this bit of territory. And that is option number one. That is narrative number one. Narrative number two, this is not actually Ukrainian copium, this is Russian copium. The second one is Russia was aware of it happening, but indecision and squabbling and incompetence prevented them from actually being able to do anything about it. That is, they couldn't, the civilians and the military were arguing, and Putin couldn't come to a decision, and the local governor didn't come to a decision, and people weren't sharing information. So they were able to detect that this was going to happen, but they just fucked it up. That's number two. That's the second one we have on the list. Number three, and this is the one that Russia's trying to push, maybe we'll do a couple subsections. A subsection of maybe one or two is that Russia was expecting an incursion, but not as big as it was. Maybe instead of like 8,000 people, they were expecting like 2,000 or something, and they were expecting more of a raid than what they wound up happening. So that's also a possibility, that they knew that this was going to happen, but they underestimated what they were actually going to come across the border with. I think that's also very possible. Now, the Russian claim is that they knew about it, but they either let it happen or they didn't have enough time to fully Okay, so let me just take a step back. So the claim, and this is from Alexander Makuris's anonymous source from within the Russian government, said that they knew that the Kursk operation was going to happen, but they decided to let Ukraine launch the attack into a basically empty portion of Russia, as a way of allowing them to divert forces from the fronts that actually mattered, and to kind of lure them into a fire trap. Now that is possible. The slightly less cope version of that is they figured it out, but they figured it out too late to build border fortifications or to bring enough troops into the area to make a difference. So they opted to make the best of what they had at the time, and they turned a surprise attack into a trap of sorts. And it can be a mixture of these different things. It could be they underestimated it, but it was a trap. It could be that they were trying to do something, but there was general incompetence. Like I said, it's very hard to know exactly what's going on. But those are kind of the various narratives we have. Now, as far as I can determine, the Ukrainians, now there's been all kinds of different numbers, and I'm not going to really, the Russians tend to be more accurate, but the number I've most commonly heard is about 8,000 Ukrainian soldiers went in to Kursk, and I think something like a third to half of them have been taken out. Ukraine's also taken extremely heavy losses to armored vehicles, and to other the various motorized units. The thing is, Russia already has a huge firepower superiority, and Ukraine was still getting hammered even on the defensive. And this isn't like in Bakhmut or Avdiivka or any of these other areas where the Ukrainians are dug in, their men are in trenches or bunkers, they're in basements, they're in the big apartment buildings that are made out of solid concrete. They don't have all that stuff. I mean, let's be honest, if you're in a foxhole, how is artillery realistically going to kill you unless it lands directly above you or in your foxhole? Dirt is a very effective way of blocking explosions. I mean, there's a reason why they have to fire hundreds of shells per guy they kill. This isn't the case in Kursk. They're out in the open. They moved up their air support. Now, their air support is up here in an exposed area, and the Russians have been blowing up a lot of it. But they're up here, they're exposed, they don't have fortifications, they don't have air cover, they just keep funneling units into this area. They don't have the number of men necessary to take Kursk anyways. So is this going? Now, the other important thing to keep in mind, and as I said this at the time, that Ukraine used its last strategic reserves trying to hold Avdiivka. Now, when Avdiivka fell, like I said, they didn't have strategic reserves anymore. So any additional front or any unit they send to it somewhere else, they have to pull from one place or another. So in terms of the Kursk offense, the Kursk incursion, these are not reserve units. These are units that they pulled from elsewhere on the line. Likewise, the units that Ukraine sent to block off the Russian Kharkov incursion had to come from elsewhere on the line. Now, Russia has been building up its forces, so to my understanding, the units Russia sent into Kharkov were not frontline combat units from their main front line. They were from the reserves. And the units who are trying to contain the Kursk incursion are also from the reserve units. They're not from their frontline battalions. So Ukraine has had to shift a lot of units, mostly their armored or more experienced or more veteran units, up to Kursk and Kharkov. Keep in mind, it requires a lot more training and experience to launch an offensive than to stay on the defensive. To my understanding, with relatively little training, you can get a guy to hold a position, or at least like be a body. You can maybe teach them to use a machine gun. You can teach them to dig. They just kind of have to hide in a trench and occasionally shoot back if somebody's coming at them. It's much simpler. A lot of the logistics and stuff like that is taken care of. But offensive, you need much better troops for. And they're just getting slaughtered here. There's also the logistical area issue. Ukraine is now not fighting on their own territory, so they have to bring supplies in from Sumy, and I'm sure the Russians are destroying all of that stuff. And if there's any supply dumps in the area, those are probably getting blown up on a daily basis. So let's see what's been happening in the rest of the front line. So, let's just finish off. Sorry, actually, let's just finish talking about Kursk first. So there's been a lot of different speculations as to why this happened. So let's go through the different speculations. Because Zelensky and Zelensky and Sersky have come out with a whole bunch of different explanations for why this happened, but they haven't. None of them have really been. A lot of them have kind of been contradictory, or it's kind of all over the place. So the first explanation, and this is the one that the pro-Russia side tends to think, is that they were trying to take the Kursk nuclear power plant. Now, some people aren't sure exactly why. Whether it was to hold it for blackmail, like some sort of will cause a meltdown unless you pull out of the rest of the front line, or to trade it for the Kherson nuclear power plant, which Russia controls and is the largest one in Europe. Maybe some other sort of concessions. There's always been these rumors that there's Russia keeps atomics somewhere near the front line, and Ukraine, some of these raids are to try to get those and then maybe use them or hold them ransom or something like that. So that's the Russian theory. They were unable to do that the first couple days in. I think that the Russians, with whatever forces they had in the area, prioritized securing the nuclear power plant over protecting the smaller settlements and countryside, and let the Ukrainians get a bit further in than they might have been able to stop them, just to make sure that the power plant was 100% secure. So that's speculation number one. Speculation number two is that this was a diversionary attack. That the whole thing that's going on in Donbass is the Ukrainians are getting creamed. Avdiivka's fallen. We'll get into it, but the Russians are just overrunning the defenses in Donbass. So maybe Ukraine thought, okay, if we launch a limited attack up here, maybe we can force the Russians to slow down here, and they'll transfer units up, and they'll give us a little bit of breathing room so we can maybe fortify some of the locations and try to hold out. So that's option two, which is also a possibility. Option three is that this is an attempt to undermine Putin in terms of Russia's domestic politics. That by doing this, they are sorry, one second. Hurting Putin. It embarrasses Putin. It makes him look really bad. It undermines the Russians' faith in him. An ongoing Western goal, an assumption throughout the entirety of this conflict, is that Putin is extremely unpopular in Russia, that his regime is very unstable, and it's just going to take like a little kick to they just have to kick the door in and the whole rotten structure will fall down. So they think if they can just maybe embarrass Putin enough times, or they can occupy parts of Russia or something like that, then maybe they can trigger a coup or a power struggle or something like that in the Kremlin, and have that happen. The thing, though, that once again I think people don't understand is that Putin is the moderate figure. The main domestic criticism of Putin is not that he's like an authoritarian, like imperialist warmonger. It's that he's a pussy, is basically what the domestic criticism is. That he's too lawyerly, he's too autistic, that he he wants to do everything by the book, that he's too concerned about world opinion, about international law. And the people who would replace him are probably a lot more radical. They're guys like Medvedev. They're guys who would just go full balls to the wall. I don't think they care about that, because I think they just have this obsession with getting rid of the Putin. And they think if they can just get rid of him, then somehow everything will work itself out. Maybe that's a straw man. I don't really think so. I think that's in line with what they've been going with. Once again, I think this is just kind of their wishful thinking. That's number two. Number three is this is just purely a media stunt to try to get attention. The Ukraine war was getting out of the headlines, and we got this like big movie. It's like the samurai charging the Gatling gun at the end of The Last Samurai. We're going to do this and try to get some more media attention, maybe get some more money from Washington. That could also be the case. Now, what I think it is, and this is, I think, honestly, what I think Zelensky's trying to do at this point in time is I think he's trying to cause a wider war. Because I think really the only possible way Ukraine has to get out of this is to bring NATO in. If unless NATO comes in, they're screwed. They have two options. They can surrender and try to get terms, or they can just kind of flounder on for a couple months and then collapse, and Russia will just dictate terms to them. Those are kind of the two options they have. I guess there's also an option if Zelensky gets overthrown in a coup. Maybe then they can get better terms. But I think really the only thing that they have is to try to do something to start World War III, to try to pull America in, to get Russia to attack America, stuff like that. And I think part of this is about that. It's about using American weapons and American tanks to invade Russia directly. It's about trying to up the ante. It's about trying to just kind of continually escalate things. I think they know that there is still a strong neocon presence in America. I think Ukraine is very near and dear to his heart. I think there is some chance that Biden will try to escalate to try to secure his legacy, because he doesn't really have anything to lose at this point in time. I don't really know. So this leads into, and I think in evidence that points in this direction, is the obsession with launching weapons deep inside of Russia. Now, you've probably all heard this. You have Storm Shadows, Tauruses, Attackums, Tomahawks, whatever your poison. There are long-range missiles that Ukraine has been asking permission to launch inside of Russia. Now, by inside of Russia, we mean inside of pre-2014 Russia. They've been launching missiles at Novorossiya, Donbass, and Crimea for years now. But the idea of launching missiles within Russia proper is something that they haven't done that much. Now, this has been one of Russia's actual red lines. A lot of the so-called Russian red lines have been Western red lines. Like the red line that of not sending tanks to Ukraine was not something I think Russia had. I think that was something that NATO had, and then they went past their own red line and pretended it was Russia's red line, so they could say that Russia doesn't care about red lines, or I don't know. It's some weird gaslighting thing. But yeah, so Russia's red line has been, if long-range missiles start coming into Russia proper, then that is going to be an escalation. That is a red line. And it's kind of hard to explain, but basically the longer range weapons cannot be used by Ukrainians. So to use like a long range weapon, so if Ukraine was to use long range weapons to, I don't know, strike into Volgograd or Samara or try to hit Moscow or something like that, the Ukrainians would not be able to do it themselves. They would need uh, American or British or NATO operators to program the missiles, to fire the missiles. They would need satellite data, stuff like that. It would be the equivalent of if during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Russians had fired, the Russian technicians on Cuba had fired non-nuclear weapons at Florida. Like they would have been in Cuba, and they would have fired ballistic missiles at various targets in Florida or Georgia or somewhere in the southern United States. That's just something that's not going to fly, because I think it's understood that the areas that Russia's occupying are different. For one thing, even their friends in Ukraine and sorry, their friends in China and India don't recognize these regions as part of Russia. So it's not internationally recognized even by countries that are allied with Russia as part of Russia. So that's viewed as being a bit different. Also, there's a difference between two powers fighting each other in a third country versus one power directly hitting another. So, for instance, during the Korean War, the Russians did send in aircraft like volunteer pilots and MiGs to help out the North Korean army, and they were dogfighting with Americans. Now, this did not constitute a war between the two sides because it was ostensibly the Russians were fighting under the banner of North Korea and the Americans were fighting under the banner of South Korea. So they were parties to the war, but they were not directly at war with each other. And on such slender distinctions does the fate of the world rest. So, once again, it's different if the U.S. is helping. Russia doesn't like it, but it's different if the U.S. is helping them fire missiles into territory that's part of the ongoing war with Ukraine versus firing missiles into Russia proper. The other thing is, I don't really get what this would change. Like, Russia is huge. Russia's the biggest country in the world. What is it that Ukraine's going to do with long range missiles that would be a game changer? A, they don't have enough. Even if they wanted, even if they wanted, they got permission to do it, they don't have enough. I don't even know what they would hit. They'd hit some power plants, they'd hit some airfields, they might blow up a couple things. It doesn't change the overall situation. It doesn't, they don't have the resources for full on strategic bombing. Like Russia's been launching dozens of times the number of missiles that Ukraine could ever manage over the last 2 years or the last 3 years, and it hasn't led to Ukraine collapsing. It's done a lot of damage, but like a strategic bombing campaign is very different than a tactical bombing campaign. Like with all these missiles, I mean, I've never knocked the ATACMS or the Storm Shadows or whatever. I'm sure they're helpful, but they kind of have to be part of a broader plan. Like if you're going to be launching an attack, and part of that attack is you use missiles to blow up aircraft or ammo dumps or fuel dumps or hit fortifications or something as part of a combined arms offensive, yeah, that makes a little bit of sense. But I don't really get like what they're even hoping to do with it. Now, the speculation, and I tend to agree with that, is what Zelensky wants is this is an escalation. So Russia has said if they start doing this, then they're going to give America's enemies throughout the world their own advanced weapons. They're gonna say, okay, we view this as America saying it's okay for us to give the Houthis, for instance, hypersonic anti-ship missiles that can sink aircraft carriers and send Russian technicians to man them because it's more or less the same thing. This means we can give Iran and Syria and North Korea and China and whoever whatever weapons we want, because that is just That is the stakes that you have risen it to. So part of this might be that Zelensky wants to do this, so then Russia will do that back, and he can try to escalate it. The other thing is that he wants to try to deliberately attack targets in Russia, such as nuclear power plants, um, hydro dams, shopping malls, just stuff that will provoke anger within Russia, and to try to provoke Putin into using atomics or just doing something really rash and over the top, and then doing a big attack, it just coming down like a stack of bricks on Ukraine, and then crying to America to try to to help them out, and to just basically try to bait Russia into escalation. Now, one of the numerous problems with this, and once again, we'll get to Donbass front in a minute, but it's important to lay this all out, is one of the reasons Russia has not gone harder, other than the fact that they're risk averse and they're just taking time to build up, and they were not very well prepared at the outset of this war, is that their various friends throughout the world care a lot about international diplomacy and international law, or at least the appearance of it. India, China, Brazil, South Africa, a lot of their various friends in other friends in Africa are kind of on Russia's side, but Russia did invade another sovereign nation and did annex territory from another sovereign nation. And as a lot of these countries have their own territorial disputes, they can't support that precedent. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Russia is invading another country and is taking land from it by force. Regardless of how you want to see it and say who was provoked who or who started the conflict, that is the reality that Russia invaded. They took Crimea and they took the 4 regions, and they'll probably take more territory before it's over. And China, India, and the gang can't endorse that. So what they've been trying to do is tell Russia to show restraint, to avoid civilian casualties, to use the minimal amount of force, all that stuff. And I think some of the times when Russia doesn't go as far as it can, it's because it's trying to appease China and India and its various friends in the global south. Now, this has changed somewhat. In the weeks leading up to the Kursk incursion, the foreign minister of Ukraine went to China to try to get them to mediate. Modi went to Kiev and offered to serve as a mediator. Orban has been trying to mediate. There was a whole bunch of efforts. Zelensky made it sound like he was interested in negotiations, that maybe he'd be willing to temporarily give up on some of the occupied territory and get it back later. And then Kursk happened, and that really pissed off a lot of the people in BRICS who thought that Ukraine was looking for a peace treaty. And some people think part of the reason why Russia's going so fast now is because they've got a bit more of a free hand. Once again, I think it's important to keep in mind that this is just all speculation I'm repeating. I don't really know, but I think probably most of this is at least somewhat true. There's probably some aspects of truth to it, even if that's not the entirety of the picture. Now, if Ukraine was to start doing crazy shit like attacking nuclear power plants with long-range missiles and stuff like that, they would make themselves the common enemy of mankind. China has been very clear that if nuclear power plants start getting attacked, they're going to intervene or they're going to do something. They will not tolerate a possible another Chernobyl happening because of this war. And that is something that I think pretty much everybody on Earth can agree to, that we don't want that happening because it's just because it's bad. Because it's bad for so many reasons. So if they were to start doing this, the U.S. would be the one obviously firing these missiles from Ukraine. If you think that the international reputation is bad now, it's going to get way worse. The other thing to keep in mind is Zelensky is cornered and desperate, And men who are cornered and desperate and have no other options, they're unpredictable. Like, he really doesn't have anything to lose. He's losing the war at this point in time. The other thing, and sorry if I'm jumping around a bit, and this was, I was on Charlemagne and we were doing a podcast, and someone was trying to steelman the Kursk invasion. It's, even if you're going to lose a war, you have to come up with a plan to win and pretend as if you still have a plan to win. Now, the ultimate example of this is probably, we're going to just do a little bit of field trip, Operation Ichigo. So you probably might not have heard of Operation Ichigo. So Operation Ichigo was one of the last, I think it was the last major Japanese offensive in World War II. So Japan had been getting their ass kicked in the Pacific. However, the Kuomintang army in China was just kind of chilling. The front was somewhat static. They had just been building up supplies and kind of just holding their ground. And Japan decided that they had to come up with some sort of plan to try to win the war, even if they were screwed at this point in time. So what they were going to do is they were going to do an overland clearing operation to try to open a corridor from north to south China, so they would be able to continue to bring resources from Indochina, Indonesia, and various places up through China over to Korea and to Japan that way, rather than have to do it all by sea. The other goal was to wipe out nationalist China, because they figured if they could wipe out nationalist China and take them out of the war, then maybe that would change the situation. There was like maybe a 1% chance that this would work, but that was their plan. So if you look at it, they basically just went along the main rail lines. They wound up killing a lot of Chinese soldiers and destroyed most of the remainder of the Chinese army, but it didn't really achieve its stated objective. But my point is, even at the end of the war, you have to try to come up with some plan to win. So that's all the speculation regarding Kursk. I'm going to be honest, I don't really have a strong opinion myself. I'm sorry if that sounds like kind of a cop-out. I think it's probably a mix of stuff. I think it's Zelensky decided at the 11th hour to just do a Hail Mary. And he's just like, look, we're going to lose anyways. Maybe this will get us some more support. Maybe this will get us some international attention. Maybe this will distract the Russians. Maybe this will undermine Putin. We might as well just try something because what we're doing isn't working. So that is the what I think. As for the stuff about BRICS and Russia being held back, I do think that that's probably true. China has to walk a very fine line because China wants to present itself as the leader of the global South. They want to present themselves as the champion of international law. They want the international law-based order as opposed to the rules-based world order. And that was kind of part of their plan. And so it makes it so that they have to be very careful. I don't know. A lot of it is very G-slur. A lot of it is very much posturing and people feigning ignorance and stuff like that. But I mean, that's just how international politics goes. So if we look at the front, even in the north, Russia started to push a bit here. Let's see. Oh, that's cool. So if we look at the beginning of August, Russia has started to make a bit of progress. The north isn't really where they've made most of the progress, but let's see here. Yeah, they are steadily moving. The Bakhmut area. Chasiv Yar is currently where they're fighting. I'm not sure how long Chesapeake Yar is going to fall out. They took the micro district, which is this area on the eastern half of the city, and they're just going to keep pushing forward there. Let's see. Let's just taking a look at what's happened over the last month. Yeah, look at this. So this is the progress Russia's made in this area over the last month. New York fell, and they've just been pretty much pushing all along both the line. It's important to keep in mind, like, let's see. So last year, the front line looked like this. In February of this year, the front line looked like this. And now in August, yeah. Okay, so this is June 1st, August 31st. So I think you can see what's going on. They're pushing pretty hard. I think once Avdiivka fell, I think the last remaining fortified city that they have in Donbass is Pokrovsk. I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry. I find a lot of the Slavic words hard to pronounce. I'm just not used to them. But yeah, they've just been heading westward pretty rapidly, all around the front. As stated, Ukraine removed a lot of its troops from the Eastern Front, and it's just sped up the collapse. A lot of these areas are just not as fortified as Avdiivka or Bakhmut were. The other thing is, part of the reason that Bakhmut took so long is... Okay, let's see here. So, Bakhmut had all of these massive concrete buildings. These are Soviet era. They're overbuilt. These things, I don't even think artillery can really damage them significantly. And so the Russians were just really struggling with them. The implementation of, yeah, like there's part of Bakhmut. Like this place is not easy to take. The introduction of fab glide bombs has given them things that are explosives that are big enough to deal with these buildings, and so they're not presenting as much of a problem as they were earlier on in the war. So they've been able to move faster. So it's a combination of Ukrainian attrition, them putting units elsewhere. They now have better fortification piercing weapons, and the areas just aren't as drawn in. So Pokrovsk. Oh no, I think also this map is the Ukrainian names, and I'm used to the Russian names, so that's kind of the other issue. So I think that is the last major one. The other nice thing is that Russia's captured has the main highway now under control, so it's going to be a lot easier for them to bring up resources for their assault here. The one Ukrainian MP said that when she went there, it was largely abandoned, and she didn't see very many Ukrainian soldiers holding the position. Nothing's happening in the south. That front's been static. It looks like there's been a little bit of pushing in the south, but not very much. But yeah, like, once again, just look at this in the last month. Yeah, it's been going pretty rapidly. Keep in mind, this is basically a trench war, so that's quite a bit of territory. Russia's going to have to be careful though, because this is looking like a salient. I don't think Ukraine, as I said, I don't think Ukraine has any mobile forces left, or they might be able to cut them off. But yeah, it just looks like they're going to keep pushing forward and getting and just taking city after city, and the pace is accelerating. Now, how much it will actually accelerate, I don't know. Russia still doesn't want to overrun its logistics. Once again, it's been very much as we'll watch this clip again.
Yield. You haven't beaten me. You have sacrificed sure footing for a killing stroke.
And they're not willing to do that. So if they feel like they're starting to outrun their supply lines, or Ukraine's starting to put up more resistance, they'll probably slow down. I'm not sure if they're not just going to make it Pokrovsk and then hold off for a while. But I don't think there's really that much before they can left before they get to the front line. So I don't really know. Now that this brings up the broader question about the fall election. Now, I've gone back and forth because I honestly don't know what Russia thinks about the American election. Now, the common wisdom seems to be that Russia wants Trump to win. I actually don't really see why Russia would want Trump to win at this point, because if Trump wins, then they're going to have like negotiations and they aren't going to be able to demand a complete capitulation. I think it's basically been said at this point in time, Putin's withdrawn all peace proposals. This thing is going to be settled on the battlefield, and it's going to be Ukraine's unconditional surrender. It's going to be extremely harsh terms. There's not going to be a treaty of sorts. Ukraine's not going to get the offer that they got earlier on, and even a couple months ago. They're just going to keep heading forward. And if Trump comes to power, then they're going to have to deal with him, and I don't think that they really want to do that. Also, I mean, Putin endorsed Biden. Now, you could say that that is a troll, or that was him trying to screw with the U.S. election. But Biden and Harris are bozos. Like, they're bozos and they're extremely weak and stupid people. They're extremely weak and incompetent people. So Putin knows what to do with them. Like, they've done everything they can for the last 3 years, and it's been one disaster after another. Like, be it the sanctions failed, or their attempts to isolate Russia internationally. Blinken screwed up all of America's foreign relations. They keep forcing Ukraine to do these retarded movie cinematic offensives and stuff like that. I don't know why. If you were Putin, why would you want Trump to win? Because my understanding is Trump has said that he will offer a peace deal to Russia. If Russia doesn't take it, they are going to just surge a massive amount of stuff to Ukraine. And that's basically going to be the plan. I don't know what he's going to send to Ukraine, though. That's kind of part of the problem. The U.S. just doesn't really have much to send. I mean, they can send some of their newer, better stuff, but they don't really have artillery shells or things like that they can deploy, unless they just want to completely deplete their own emergency stocks, which is possible, I guess. But that, in Trump is many things, but he's not a pussy. Not like Biden, not like Kamala. Putin won't be able to mog Trump in the way he mogs the other people. So honestly, if I'm Putin, if I have any preference, I'd probably want Kamala to stay in power because then to win the election, because then Blinken will probably remain the worst Secretary of State in American history, and it'll just be just the unserious bozos will keep running the show. If Trump comes to power, he's dangerous. There is a. It's useful to have that little bit of doubt, to have not too much, but a little bit where people think you're crazy and they don't know what you're going to do. Even if you're not going to ever use nuclear weapons, the idea that other people think you might and are cautious around that is an advantage when it comes to international negotiations. Like I said, Trump is a much stronger personality and he's willing to play hardball and he's stuff like that. So honestly, I think Putin would prefer Trump. I think though Putin has largely left this up to the Russian army, and I think Russia just doesn't really care about the US election, to be honest. If I had to make a guess, they don't really care at this point in time. If Trump wins, they'll deal with it. If Kamala wins, they'll deal with it. They have their military plan, they have their own timetable they're going to be moving on. And they're just done with the constant nonsense of Minsk, of Istanbul, of the Zelensky peace plan, of the peace conferences they don't get invited to, of Ukraine trying to mediate with China, of them freezing the conflict, of all just this like retardation. I think Russia's just tired of it, and they're just continuing the special military operation in whatever way they want to, and they just don't really care. They just don't really care like what America's doing, what the West is doing. I think the term in Go is tanuki, which is you just ignore what your opponent is doing and you focus on your own plan. I think that's more or less what they've come up with. Like, there's not really much that they can do at this point other than intervening directly or giving Ukraine, I don't know, atomics or something, or sending in an expeditionary force. Like, they've emptied out their arsenals. So, unless they want to, I don't know, do something else, I don't really know what it is. So yeah, so that's what I think. People in the chat, a couple people posted, but you know what? Let me just do a poll. Okay, Rain, maybe. Okay. Who does Putin want to win the U.S. election? Trump, Kamala, by the way, we didn't cover this, but this was like one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. Ukraine. So this is one of the most bizarre things I think I've ever seen. So, as you guys may or may not know, Wagner is very prevalent in Russia. They largely got kicked out of. There's still some of them, but they mostly got kicked out of the Ukraine front, and now they're being sent to Africa to kind of serve as a proxy for Russia. Now, the weird thing is in Sudan, Wagner is backing the Rapid Support Forces, but Russia is backing the government. So I don't know if that's like the plan to hedge their bets or what it's about. It's pretty odd. So there was an ambush in Mali. Let's see here. That killed supposedly 84 Wagner fighters and 47 Mali soldiers. 2 days after this happened, the spokesman for Kiev's military intelligence service, GUR, said that the ethnic Tuareg rebels in Mali had retrieved necessary information, and not just information, which enabled received. Sorry, they gave them necessary information and supported them in their attack against the Russian war criminals. Subsequent reports suggest that the Ukrainian special forces had trained the separatists in the use of attack drones. So Ukraine is sending special forces to Mali, to the Sahel, to train rebels to fight Wagner mercenaries. Like, it's so bizarre. What the fuck is Ukraine doing in Mali? Why is this even happening? Um oh, this was proven fake? Oh, okay. Was it? I don't know. I mean, this was BBC. BBC, Reuters. Oh, it's just a big G slur op by Ukraine. Okay, so a Tuareg rebel line said it did not receive any support from Ukraine. Okay, so Brenton Group is explaining that the ambush happened and then Ukraine pretended to claim responsibility for it when they weren't actually involved with it. I don't know. It's weird. Um, but Mally got really pissed off about it. By the way, before I forget, is there a picture of it? Yeah, okay, so I forgot about this. So the former foreign minister of Poland, um, when Nord Stream got blown up, said thank you, USA. So that happened. So I think it's pretty much been confirmed that Ukraine blew up Nord Stream. Okay, so it's admitted. Yeah, so Guardian, Politico, um, BBC, New York Times. So I think it's generally agreed upon that Ukraine blew up Nord Stream. Now, did this actually happen? I don't know. Ukraine was probably involved. Poland was probably also involved. The U.S. was 100% involved. Like, if you've looked at the narrative, and I made like a joke about it, it's like a Hollywood movie. It's like you got the five dudes and the lady on like the 2 hour tour. It's like Gilligan and the skipper. They went out and they blew up Nord Stream. Germany, for whatever reason, seems completely okay with the fact that Ukraine blew up their pipeline. Um, like they just seem completely okay with it. I guess they're still going to give resources to Ukraine. Um, so yeah, that insanity has been happening as well. So what else is there to talk about? maybe just I'm people in the chat. Is there something I've been forgetting? I think that's most of what's been happening at the moment. Um, as I've said, it's a slow motion collapse. It's the case where I could see the war ending next week, or I could see it ending next year. It's really just however long until the attrition finally just has degraded Ukraine's ability to resist, that it can no longer do any sort of take any sort of meaningful action to defend itself, and Russia can just walk in and impose whatever terms it has. So once again, this could be next week, this could be in a month, this could be in a couple months, this could be in a year. I don't know how long the Ukrainian army is going to hold on. I don't know how long they're going to keep receiving Western support. I don't know what Russia's timetable is, because Russia's doing its own thing. So maybe that's profoundly unhelpful, but I don't know. The last time I gave a timeline, I was wrong. I had said that I thought Ukraine would start negotiations um, by the summer, and as this is the last day of the summer, I'm felted on that. I was wrong. So I'm not going to give another timeline. To be honest, I do think we are in the final phase of the war. I just don't know how long the final phase will be. I stand by what I said. Brenton Group, I covered the F-16 earlier. I covered that near the beginning. I maintain that Ukraine permanently lost the initiative and their ability to launch large-scale offensives. I don't consider Kursk to be a large-scale offensive. I consider it to be a raid. Um, it's they would have had to take a major settlement or had like a reasonable chance of holding territory for it to be anything more like for it to be an actual offensive. In my opinion, I don't think it is. I think it's just an incursion or a raid. Um, and I don't think they have like I don't know like what would the best case scenario be? They don't have the soldiers to take Kursk. How big is Kursk? Um, yeah, Kursk has a population of like 4 to 500,000. 400,000. You aren't going to take a city of 400,000 with 8,000 dudes, especially like when you're launching an offensive. Um, so no, I'm not like embarrassed. I'm just trying to be honest and accountable. I'm not going to be one of these people who pretends I didn't say something when I did say something. So I was wrong about that. I do maintain though that I was correct about the strategic initiative being permanently lost. The fact that Ukraine launched a cross-border raid, I don't think really counts as a major offensive. They even if they were to scrape everything they have together, I don't think there's realistically anything they could do in Donbass at this point in time. If they get a whole bunch of brigades together and pull out of Kursk and move down here, then maybe they can hold this for a little while longer. I'm not sure when the fall rains or the Ritsputsia or however you pronounce it is coming. I'm not sure if that's coming soon or that's going to be in a while or what. And if Russia's going to stop. I don't know if Russia's going to stop in the fall and then maybe continue again in the winter. Like I said, at this point in time, they're just moving entirely on their own timetable. And I don't think any of us really know for certain what that timetable is. And that is kind of an advantage. Um, your enemy not knowing what you're doing or knowing what your overall strategy is. So, once again, as I said, I think now it just comes down to how long the Ukrainian army can last, how long before Zelensky gets removed, either by the U.S. or the by internal forces in Ukraine. how hard Russia wants to push. Because I don't know when Russia wants to end this war. Like, if they want to keep it going, because there is a chance they might just want to keep it going because it's going well for them. Europe is getting felted when it comes to their energy prices, and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't really know. Um, but those are the main updates that have been going on. So, just briefly, we'll just talk a little bit about the situation in the Middle East. Now, things have kind of been quiet. Now, the problem with what's been going on there, and I think Israel has started an operation in the West Bank. That they started yeah, they've started an operation in the West Bank, um, attacking various Palestinian outposts or whatever. Uh, I think so. Okay, so let me give my overall impression of where I think the war is at. I think Netanyahu believes that if he gets removed from power, if the war ends, he will spend the rest of his life in jail for corruption or war crimes or something. Because a lot of people don't like him in Israel, and a lot of people think part of the reason this war was launched was so that he would be able to get rid of. He would be able to detract information. Oh, West Bank operations were abandoned after 45 hours. Okay, so they have been abandoned. Okay, thank you for that, uh, Constantine. A lot of these things have been moving pretty quick. So I do think it's in his interest to keep the war going. Now, so when the Gaza war started, you had the National Unity Government. Now, the National Unity Government included some centrist parties. It included New Hope, which I guess is not centrist, but like liberal parties. It included uh, it included a bunch of more moderate parties at the start of the war cabinet. Now, what wound up happening is recently they left. So the current coalition that we have at the moment in Israel has become a lot more ideologically coherent, and the remaining moderates are basically gone at this point in time. Let me just see, where's the Knesset? Okay. So the current majority government is Likud, Shas, which is the Hadrati religious party, the National Religious Party, the Jewish Power Party, and the some other far right Orthodox Jewish fascist party. So the coalition doesn't include the moderate factions anymore. So because it doesn't include them anymore, you basically, and I always like to bring up Ben-Gvir because Ben-Gvir is just awesome because he looks like a Bond villain. He's the most. Oh wait, is that him rubbing his hands? That's amazing. Ben-Gvir, the head of the Jewish Power Party. Look at that. If that's not like a happy merchant, I don't know what is. Um, I forget. I think I talked about the whole rape thing that wound up. Yeah, I did. I covered the rape thing. Yeah. So when Netanyahu is the moderate in the coalition, that's not a good place to be. Let's see, who's the head of the National Religious Party? Oh, Smotrich. Yeah. Bezalel Smotrich. Let me see. So there's some funny pictures of him. No, the pictures of him aren't as funny. Uh but let me see. The triumvirate who's running Israel. Who else do we have here? That lady. Who's the head of United Torah Judaism? Oh wow, that's amazing. Yitzhak Goldknopf, the head of the United Torah Judaism Party. Look at this dude. It's like evil Santa Claus. But anyways, that's the current coalition that's governing Israel. It's a lot more ideologically consistent. They don't have to worry about appeasing the more moderate forces. Netanyahu is the most moderate force in the government, which is scary. So I think what Israel wants at this point in time is it's something of a stalemate. They failed to destroy Hamas. Hamas, from what I've heard, has actually rebuilt a lot of its combat potential. They've completely just leveled Gaza. They failed at their main goal, so they haven't succeeded in defeating Hamas. They haven't succeeded in defeating Hezbollah. They haven't succeeded in defeating Iran. The Houthis are still launching missiles at them. They haven't really achieved any of their objectives. They also haven't ethnically cleansed Gaza yet because Egypt isn't accepting casualties. So they have to come up with some sort of a plan. And I think what their plan is escalation. So they obviously killed the head of Hamas while he was visiting Tehran on a diplomatic mission for the swearing in of the new president of Iran. The Mossad assassinated him, probably with the U.S.'s support. And Iran vowed revenge, but then nothing happened, and things have gone very quiet since then. Now, here's the speculation. And this is, to be fair to Iran, this is the problem they face. If Iran has been told by the U.S., by France, by Britain, that if they strike back at Israel after Israel assassinated a foreign head of state and blew up their embassy, then they're going to get involved. Then they're going to come in and they're going to felt Iran. They're going to send in carrier groups and bomb them and declare war and do all this other stuff. So Iran, contrary to what my people think and what even I used to think, the Iranians aren't stupid. The Persians, you can say a lot about them. They're not a stupid people. They're not a they're not a dopey people. They aren't like some of the third world people we deal with. Now, there's a lot of stupid stuff in Iran, and they've done a lot of incompetent stuff, but they're not dumb. They understand. They're able to look at a map. They're able to look at the relative distribution of forces. So one speculation is they are waiting at the moment for the U.S. to withdraw its forces from the Gulf before they wind up doing anything. That they're prepared. They're getting ready. They're waiting for the U.S. to withdraw. They managed to get a bunch of state-of-the-art air defense platforms from Russia that are being set up across the country. They're just waiting, and it's going to be revenge is the dish best served cold. Once the U.S. is out of the way, once Israel's guard is down, they're going to do what they're going to do. Hezbollah, to my understanding, still has all of its ballistic and most of its cruise missiles. The rockets they're firing are not the most powerful ones in their arsenal. So Hezbollah can kind of keep going on indefinitely. So I don't know what Iran is planning to do. I think that's part of it. I think we're playing kind of a game of international chicken. I think in part Iran is hoping that Israel does something first. that Israel loses its nerve, that it launches another attack on Iran, that it does some more political assassinations or something like that, and just continues to turn the world against it more and more. Netanyahu, I think his goal at this point in time is to get the U.S. involved, and that includes trying to get Iran to attack them, like trying to bait Iran into hitting them, and to try to just get the U.S. to intervene, because the Israelis don't have the forces to deal with all of their various enemies, and they want the war to escalate. And if the war escalates, they can use it as a pretense to ethnically cleanse Gaza and the West Bank. But as I've said, well, I'm sure the IDF could beat Israel. I don't think. The IDF could beat Hezbollah. Hezbollah are not some like bum country bumpkins. They're trained professional soldiers with modern equipment, modern training. They're motivated. They have special forces. A lot of them are trained in most of their core soldiers. I think are trained in like radio operation, and there's lots of specialist training. They have, I think, a core of 30,000 dudes who basically are as well trained as any major army in the world, and they have a bunch more reservists that they can call upon. Which, let me see, how many people did the IDF send into Gaza? Also, they're dug in. That's another thing to keep in mind. Okay, so Israel sent in supposedly 500,000. I don't know how long that lasted for. Just trying to find. I don't know. Is Israel going to be able to get anywhere near that number of soldiers to invade southern Lebanon? Are they actually going to be able to win against Hezbollah? I mean, they lost last time, or it was inconclusive last time. I'm looking for the one in, I think it's 2003. Maybe. I'm just trying to find, because I'm trying to remember when they had a fairly large one. The 2006 war, which was inconclusive. Israel didn't lose, I guess, but they didn't succeed in destroying Hezbollah. It just kind of went nowhere. And considering that Hezbollah is not a state actor and Israel is, I think you could say that it's a strategic Hezbollah victory. So I don't know. Once again, I'm sure the IDF could beat Hezbollah if they really put their back into it, but it's going to be expensive. It's going to be politically difficult. And I'm not sure if the IDF of today is the IDF of the 1970s or even the 1980s. I don't think it's going to go very well, to be perfectly honest. So that, I think, covers it. I hope people found it interesting. I hope people learned something. And I just want to say, God bless everybody. Have a great weekend. Have a great Sunday. If you're in Canada, it's the long weekend. I think it's a long weekend in America as well. But have a nice